Welcome to another episode of Four Guys Talking About AI. I'm here with my good friends, John Gerard, Neil Polachek, and Greg Sterling. Hey guys, how are you?
What's happening?
Hey. All right, another big week in AI. Let's go through a few things that we're going to talk about today. One story came out this week talking about how comparing marketing language, where if you have AI powered coupled with the value prop of what that item is, whether having that AI powered in the language and the marketing language helps to create more sales or not. We'll also talk about the robot doctor and how doctors are or are not adopting AI or using AI in their workflow, and how that might impact healthcare going forward. There was also a really interesting number of people that came out this week talking about how the $6 million number for DeepSeek is not the right estimate for how much it actually cost to create that DeepSeek model. And that was the model that crashed NVIDIA's stock price this week. And then we've got some notes in the field about AI personalization that we'll get into. But right off the top, let's get into this AI powered versus whether AI powered in the marketing language is useful for that or not.
There's a company called Irrational Labs that does user testing and behavioral research. And they produced a study involving 767 participants. You know, this was a relatively educated group divided between men and women, average income levels. And they were shown marketing landing pages for real products featuring AI capabilities. And in one case, the product descriptions, this is not a survey, they're being shown actual images of these product promotions. In one case, the product description included terms like AI powered or generative AI. And then in the other case, the copy was really focused on the features and benefits, and it didn't mention AI. And so, the conventional wisdom would be, it's not entirely clear if this is a B2B audience, if these are B2B buyers, or if these are just straight consumers. It seems like it's a more consumery audience than B2B. So that might be a little bit of a caveat. The two creative examples that they show are Zendesk and Intuit. And there's a little bit of a B2B dimension to them, but Intuit, for example, is promoting the Intuit Assistant, which is a financial assistant. That would be more of a consumer-facing thing. The Zendesk stuff, which is obviously customer service, is a B2B product more inherently. So they showed side-by-side copy, and the short version is then in almost all of these cases, the AI version lost. The AI-powered labeling did not improve performance expectations, the customer's willingness to pay, with one exception. Trust was another variable that they looked at. The big takeaway here is that you should really focus on values and features and benefits and the value of what the AI delivers. Now,
Isn't that marketing 101?
well, it is, except AI was this kind of shiny new object, and everybody wanted to claim that they had it because,
we don't buy things because of that. We buy things, particularly in B2B, we buy them because we're rational buyers and we need some benefit from whatever we're choosing to buy.
So one caveat first, they said they're testing with average people. So this is not, and these are not
Average
AI
person.
These are not AI users. Only a small percentage of the group that they tested with were AI users. So there might be a different perception in a very hardcore B2B context, or for people that had a lot of experience and exposure to AI. Because I think general consumers are more ambivalent about it than people who are actually engaged with it, adopters who see the value of it.
But it's still missing you're selling something. What are the benefits? The benefit is not that there's AI inside, though Intel used to play that game for a long time and sold a lot of chips because of that. But that was a brand within other brands. This is a wrapping around this stuff. So I'm not surprised by those findings.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately with this kind of thing, marketers can't help themselves, right? It's just, impossible when there's this much buzz around something to resist the temptation to insert it into every possible place that you can. And that, that doesn't just go for the marketers, it's also the product people. And it's kind of funny to me how many features that have been around for a very long time in some of these apps are now apparently AI, right? So please wait, well, our AI does this thing. It's like, come on, we know this is an AI, but
Well, they're doing that for investors, the investment community,
that's right.
That too.
Yeah.
Keep ahead. Stay with the competition. So a lot of that marketing language is probably not even directed at the buyer, but is directed at their investment community.
I mean, I think to some degree that's true. One of the things that this research reflects, is sort of a more general principle about marketing, which is really know your customer, understand your customer and what their concerns are and what they respond to. And I think there's a lot of marketing that occurs in a kind of vacuum. People do some limited amount of research, or they have a general sense of what they think the market wants or their customers want, or there's some very marginal anecdotal information, and then they make a bunch of assumptions and they run with campaigns that may not be aligned with, they may not fully understand who their target customer is. That's more fundamental, but they may run with campaigns that don't really address the basic needs of their customers, which I think is what this sort of goes to. What is this tool gonna do for me is the thing that the user really wants to understand, rather than this kind of shiny wrapper that AI represents.
And I think, Andy, you might have been trying to say it. I think some of it comes from the boardrooms of these companies.
That's right. Yeah. Because, the board is always asking questions like, what's our AI play? How are we going to differentiate ourselves? We got competitors going out to the market with AI, this and that.
Oh,
what are you doing?
Shove it on the website. That's our play.
Well, and it reflects what you're saying, Neil. I mean, this is what you're also saying, Andy, is that it reflects there are multiple constituencies for these campaigns and these, press releases and website copy and marketing copy. And those people are often the ones that the internal employees are playing to more than the customer. They sort of assume, they look at their competitors, they assume this is something everybody else is doing, they have to do it too, and it pleases the stakeholders, whoever those may be.
On a case study, we were talking with Thrive, which is a client member of ours, and they had nothing on their website until like 2 months ago, and then it's just
until you encourage them to do it, Neil.
I encourage them. All I said was, "Gee, I don't see anything about AI on your website," and they said, "Oh well, our marketing people are doing a massive assessment of where we need to be." They looked at all these other competitive sites and they go, "Oh, we're falling behind all these other sites."
Right, exactly. But they didn't talk to the customer.
That's not surprising that they behaved that way. And, if they had some more, not discipline, but if they wanted to be more contrarian, they might have kept it off there and focused on the benefits. But it's really hard when everybody else out there has got it on their website and yours doesn't.
Yep.
How did it impact their sales? Are they getting more sales?
We don't know.
Yeah.
It's too recent. We don't know. I mean, I think that there's probably some hybrid approach, like in a lot of these situations, which is probably the right way forward, where AI is sort of in the mix, but it's not what you lead with. We have this super new capability powered by AI, but here's what it's going to deliver. It makes your life easier in these ways.
It makes your life easier, save you time, and oh, by the way, it's powered by AI. That's a much more benefit-driven kind of point of view than here's our AI-powered thing to do that,
I mean, the copy in the study was, to give you an example, in the Zendesk case, the AI copy was AI first service catered to humans, and the value message was service that's up close and personal. And then in the Intuit case that they shared, the AI message was your generative AI powered financial assistant, versus the value message, which is your on-demand financial assistant, save time, stress, and money.
Benefits.
One is right. One is sort of abstract, the AI messaging, and the other is much more concrete, the value messaging. Here's what it's going to do for me, and oh, I like that. I mean, it's intuitively more appealing.
So let's take a step back and just sort of wonder for a second here, what's that going to, if we come back to this topic in 6 months, they take all this stuff off the websites, or do they start sort of re-putting the benefit first, and then it's more powered underneath AIs going on in the background? What do you think?
It's more like that. I think that's where it goes. I mean, there's the old adage, features tell, benefits sell, right? So if you're selling something, you're going to lead with benefits, and then you might back it up. Just like if you're a snowboarding company and you make a Gore-Tex jacket, right? You're going to promote Gore-Tex in there, but you're really going to promote the quality or the waterproof and keep you warm and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I also think, consistent with how hype cycles, roll, what happens is that everybody uses the framing because you can't afford not to. And half the people who are using framing don't even know what it means. They just know that everybody else is doing it. And eventually, as the sort of sediment settles out and everybody can more clearly see what AI actually is and has a better understanding of it, then people have to sort of quietly retract the various, places where they've said this thing is AI and it isn't. And so, what's left is stuff that probably really is AI if it's being called AI.
The hype cycle is real too. You think about how this plays out down the road. If AI does really wipe out a lot of jobs and people are, in fact, without work because of AI,
that's going to be.
They're not promoting AI going forward in their messaging.
Yeah, you're totally right. They'll be hiding it. People will be resentful.
Right? I've always wondered about this. Like, what happens in this world where you play it out and you end up with millions of people without jobs? And sure, there's this narrative of, well, people also create jobs. Maybe, don't know yet about that. You can kind of extrapolate with certainty that it'll replace a lot of jobs that are highly repetitive or, what have you. But if you play that out and you end up with a lot of people who are out of work, at what point does the revolution begin? Does it begin, where people go anti-AI, but then you've got like robots out in the marketplace, or, like I saw these guys, I saw this video of these guys that were just like beating up a Waymo car, why? I don't know. They're just violent.
It's the Luddite phenomenon.
Yeah.
But, it's sort of like a microcosm that you can extrapolate out in the future. If people are out of work and there's lack of hope because of that, or what have you, however that might play out, AI becomes a dirty word at some point in that.
And you know what? We were talking about this yesterday on a thing Greg and I were doing, and maybe it was 2 days ago. I think of it as big AI and little AI. Little AI is putting stuff into one of these platforms and getting a great answer back. That's little AI. I think little AI has a lot of trust in it. It's taken off. Big AI is the dislocation of our society, the undoing of we have a society that people can earn money. That's, I think, much more, that's a much scarier thing, that big AI. But little AI, I think people are really, digging this stuff.
It's a good framing. I like that.
Bill Gates went on the Tonight Show. He's promoting a memoir, I think, called Source Code, I think is the name of the book. My Source Code, My Beginnings is the name of the book. And so one of the things he said on that appearance was AI will be able to do most of the things that people are doing today. And I mean, he made some very broad statements that they didn't explore in depth. But for the people who are active AI boosters, there's a belief that, this is something Sam Altman said, this is stuff that has been said by others, that AI has the capacity to take over much more work than people would like in the society. And, it's already starting to happen in the Wall Street environment, with AI sort of replacing some of these entry-level people. We've talked about this quite a bit. So I think, as with all things, they don't play out in the ways that are predicted. It doesn't play out entirely in the dystopian scenario, nor does it provide a kind of utopian situation where people are just sitting back and drinking Mai Tais and, watching machines do all the labor for them. There's some middle ground, right? And I mean, one of the things that's going on right now, and the kind of controversial activity that's happening in Washington with the kind of forced resignations that are happening with workers, is that you've got OpenAI that's introduced a government-facing tool, and you've got Musk who's promoting AI, and some of his people are saying, "Well, we'll do some of these jobs with AI." So I think there's a vision that's not being clearly articulated publicly that they'll get rid of a lot of employees, which would seemingly compromise the capacity of these agencies to function, and do some of those functions with AI. But we'll see what happens.
The robot doctor story, right? So the robot doctor will see you now. Research suggests that physicians are undervaluing how artificial intelligence can improve medical care. Neil, you want to talk about that?
This is again a radiologist, right, Greg? This was the study about radiologists where independently AI achieved 92% accuracy versus physicians, 76 versus physicians, 74. Radiologist is the first. It's like marketing. It's like Marcom. It's the first layer to be sort of tested. And can these tools work better? And as a patient, that's a troubling number. That's a troubling number as a patient. 3/4 of the time, they're going to get it right without AI. AI by itself will get it right almost 90% of the time. That's a big delta. That's 15 percentage points. In this case, maybe it's 18 percentage points.
That's the difference. That's the difference between surgery or not.
That's right. Cases. Or a treatment plan or not. Right.
Right.
And that's, to me, that's scary. I mean, that as a patient, I think that's reassuring. The question I would have is like, how soon is this going to roll out to all these doctors? And what are the barriers to these, established practices where they do it their established way? And when will these physicians realize that letting the machine do the initial diagnosis frees them up to have patient time, which if you ask most patients, what they're troubled by is the lack of bedside manner, the lack of time I actually get to speak to my physician. So there's a whole lot going on there that I'm glad to see it's so good at that aspect of it. The question is, will it be good at the actual surgery process?
They're developing robot surgeons.
Yeah, right. That's right. And how much better will the robot be than the actual physician using the same kind of robotic devices? That's a lot to be explored.
One sort of wrinkle here is that they said that you talk about the radiology differences, but one wrinkle is that when AI interviewed the patients, I guess the patient is having some interaction with either a voice, synthetic voice, or maybe entering information via a keyboard. The accuracy dropped when the physician wasn't there. So a physician being present with a patient improved the interview, and they got better information than if just the AI did it, as opposed to diagnosing the X-ray after the fact. So there, the doctor's presence mattered in the human interaction component and eliciting information from the patient.
There was an article in the same publication, I think it was the New York Times, where the doctor said a while ago, back in October, I'm a doctor, ChatGPT's bedside manner is better than mine. Why? Because it's undistracted. Because it can focus on that person at that moment. It's not taking a bunch of, inputs, trying to process. Let me try and talk to John here while I'm hearing something in the background, while I get a call on my device, while I see a text message, and the distractions are not there. So it has the potential to do a better job, as that article said, on the bedside manner stuff because it's focused. It's very, very focused.
If you look at the economics around this, also there's, according to the radiologybusiness.com, $66 billion is spent on medical imaging a year in the US. Right. So that's a huge number. So if AI can cut into that a lot, it reduces healthcare costs for individuals. B, insurance companies benefit from that as well, which I'm sure there's some sort of incentive for insurance companies to try to squeeze out $1 out of that one.
And most importantly, misdiagnosis goes down.
Exactly. So,
well, that's the angle there is liability, right?
Result, you know,
that's the trifecta, right? I mean, that's the trifecta.
So that's absolutely true. And if we were much better as a species at making purely data-driven decisions, we would move a lot of decisioning over to AI like yesterday, right? But it's the same thing as we saw with self-driving cars, which, you know, use machine learning and AI. A self-driving car accident that kills somebody gets so much more attention than, you know, the 1,000 people that died in car wrecks the same day that were caused by humans, you know, and just, it's going to be hard to get out of that psychology as it pertains to all this stuff. Like, no matter how good it is, the other thing that we see that's interesting is, you know, like, not all mistakes are created equally. So, like, we may very well be able to tolerate, well, it was human error. But, you know, some gruesome error that, you know, by a machine or by an AI that leads to a death will be treated very differently. Even again, even again, on, you know, on a life by life basis, if you know, the data suggests that we're, you know, doing quite a bit better with machine decision making.
And even if you put the data in front of people to show them that, you know, 92% of the time it's more accurate, it's the one time it's not is going to get all the attention. And the fact that only 74% of the time the doctors are accurate.
Yeah, and partly, again, I think that can be because the ways in which AI can be wrong are foreign and alien and confusing to us, right? So like, even if it's 99.99999% accurate, if the 0.0001% time it's wrong, it's because it told you to put Elmer's glue on your pizza, and, you know, somebody died from that, hearkening back to a prior episode. You know, that alien, absolutely insane mistake is going to trump whatever the number said.
So that's an education process, isn't it? I mean, that's. I
think it's partly educational, but it's partly just it's basic human psychology and wiring that we're never going to get over. I think.
I agree with what John is saying, because what you've got with data is a kind of rational, higher brain kind of function, right? It's like, here's the evidence to support the inclusion of AI in some diagnostic medical procedure. That's all rational. I mean, you can get into a kind of a more emotional place. It'll save lives. It'll, you know, whatever. You can package it up in a more emotional way. The dystopian doomsday scenarios are much more go to a much more primal place. Fear, kind of lizard brain, survival. They play to a very different kind of quality, which is why, you know, fear is such an effective tool that will manipulate people. And it, you know, it's people are not rational, and they don't think rationally. They are emotional. They respond based on, you know, these kinds of selective beliefs and fear. And so I think this is what we're seeing in this kind of discussion is that you know, you could try and persuade people with all the facts you want, but it's not as powerful as an anecdote which suggests that the technology is
until
messed up,
until people, you know, get really comfortable being driven around in Waymos, right? That's
sure.
A great. And I think you said your daughter doesn't do anything but Waymos in the city.
No, she only does Waymo now, and she loves it. And yeah, totally. I mean, it goes to the point about experience.
Her brain is being rewired to be more accommodating of this AI world.
But not
already.
exactly, because the reason she's doing Waymos is because she doesn't want to deal with randos, as she says, and she doesn't have to fear the driver and whatever the driver's creepy behavior is. And so that's a survival thing. That's a primal thing. It's like this, on balance, taking my life into my hands by getting into this machine that has no driver is better than risking whatever late night coming home from a bar with some, you don't know,
Right. But I'd argue her brain's already being rewired a little bit to be more accepting of these machines.
Oh yeah, she's totally sold on Waymo, but it doesn't generalize to everything.
Well, going back to what John was saying, that there's, if it bleeds, it leads, right? Like that's your the lizard brain that you're talking about, Greg, that like people over exaggerate a failure kind of story in a new technology like AI when that kind of happens. And I would imagine that that's likely why there's a slow adoption of AI in healthcare, being as sensitive as it is and being the liability issues around it. It would make sense that would be the case and there are a number of reasons why physicians might not adopt AI, right? There's a lot of people aren't technology. A lot of doctors aren't technology people to begin with, right? So that exists. There's money that, what happens if I adopt it? Yeah, business model. What happens in my business model? Do I cannibalize myself by introducing it into my practice? That's a real concern. Am I going to get paid from the insurance companies if I do introduce it, right? Those are all valid concerns around, or maybe I get paid less from a business model. So there aren't really any incentives right now for physicians to adopt AI.
Well, unless they're putting their patients first, and 92% of the time it gets the right diagnosis versus me by myself 74% of the time. But I mean,
there's no liability for you, just business as usual versus taking on this new thing and a perceived risk of potential liability.
The story is if you have X-rays, take a photo of with using your ChatGPT app so that you can use the camera feature.
Well,
and,
I mean,
see what it says.
we were talking the other day about how people get medical tests and then we'll use AI to interpret the numbers. I mean, the doctor, here's your test results and you don't know what the hell they mean. What are these numbers and are they in the range? Are they not in the range? And ChatGPT can tell you immediately what they mean in a way that is very satisfying.
Let's move on to our next topic here, which is so the DeepSeek story tanked NVIDIA's stock majorly, the biggest loss of valuation of any company ever. It was $600 billion that it lost
in a single day.
Turns out that there are a lot of stories that have been coming out since then around how 6 million. The DeepSeek number was that it took $6 million to create what ChatGPT or OpenAI could have done with their latest reason model, and a lot of reports are coming out saying that that's just actually not true. It doesn't account for the NVIDIA chips that DeepSeek has. That Highflyer is the Chinese hedge fund that funded DeepSeek, and the $6 million number doesn't include any of the infrastructure that it took to create that. Didn't include previous models, and so therefore you're not comparing apples to apples. The damage has been done to NVIDIA, and they're starting to work their way back in the market as a result of some of these stories.
We all looked at that story. As crazy as the AI world is, that seemed even more crazy. But it's hard to know what to believe anymore when these news stories are coming out every week. That every week our mind is more blown. So it seemed, shoot, maybe that is possible that they did this whole thing on $6 million, or why not 6,000, or why not $6, right? Maybe somebody built this wallet in Minecraft. But yeah, it looks like it wasn't quite correct. They're sort of like adjusting the numbers there a little bit. Actually, what we meant was it was the $6 million that we spent on meals for the developers. That was where that number. So, but what's interesting about all this, I think, from my perspective, is it is going to be very hard to untangle what the actual costs associated with doing all these things are. Partly because of the sort of opacity around are people willing to really share the true numbers, and do they have a reason? Do they benefit by putting out a number that isn't actually correct? And the other is this really interesting phenomenon of like building on the shoulders of the teams that came before you, which is just going to keep happening given the very open research nature of all of AI. So, let's say, for instance, that they did only spend $6 million on it. Would they have been able to do that without
all the other people doing all the
right? And the answer is no. So, so that's interesting, that you can actually leverage all this other stuff that's happened. But it is incomplete to say, I mean, I could just as easily say I recreated all of OpenAI's work for $20 because I just put something into ChatGPT and it worked. And $20 is my monthly subscription fee, right? So we have to sort of be careful, I think, about how we interpret these numbers.
So there were two to follow up on that. I mean, the claim was that DeepSeek trained its smaller model on OpenAI's model. I mean, they don't know that for sure, but that's the belief, as you just said. And there were two. There was some researchers at Berkeley, some grad students and faculty that claimed to have reproduced the R1 DeepSeek model for essentially $30 and doing the same kind of thing. They used OpenAI in the same way that, or they used DeepSeek in the same way that DeepSeek used OpenAI, and they created this very inexpensive model that purports to be able to function at that same level. And then there was a Stanford team that did something similar for the recreated OpenAI's O1 reasoning model for under $50, and it's probably a similar method. I talked to one entrepreneur who was before DeepSeek came out, his CTO was doing something quite similar with Gemini. They were training a model on Gemini that was, where they were trying to accomplish something and trying to build something that would bring their costs way down. And they were successful doing that, this sort of distillation methodology, using the established model to train the smaller model. And that seems to be something that I think people will duplicate again and again and again going forward, probably. And I don't know what it means in terms of these foundation models, which are essential for the training. But there have been a number of companies who were using the OpenAI API and have said, we're switching to DeepSeek.
It reminds me of this old joke of how many guitar players does it take to screw in a light bulb? 10, one to do it, the other 9 to go, I can do that. So that's kind of what's happening here, right? Is that you have like all these copycats, which is kind of also ironic that ChatGPT is based on ripping off everybody else's IP to train its own model as well. So that the irony is clear and present. But what I think, when you extrapolate all this out, I think what happens is that the cost of these LLMs comes way down. Whether it's like, these researchers that you're talking about, Greg, and subsequent ones that are going to happen further. The LLM software development on these is just going to get reduced a lot. And then I think what happens is that this application layer on top of this, of creating these highly verticalized and very specific kind of use cases, those go deep. So the LLMs are wide, and then you have these deep use cases that are vertical specific that really, whether it's you build robotics on top of that or you build software applications on top of it. There's been a lot written about how, the SaaS industry is dead now because of, what's going to replace it is these highly verticalized AI applications that get developed. And it seems like from what everybody is starting to talk about is that's where this new market is, and that's where things go in terms of opportunity of how you create these highly verticalized and specialized applications on top of the LLMs, and the cost of the LLMs comes down so much that the customer cost of whatever it is to buy these software solutions in these highly verticalized ways, those costs also come down a lot.
One of the challenges, though, there, Andy, is that I think the statement that the SaaS industry is dead is simplistic. I mean, I think there's a lot of disruption, a lot of changes ahead, but one of the issues, at least from a B2B standpoint, is that people want integrated solutions that solve a bunch of problems. That could work in a modular case where you plug into something that somebody's already using, but to have a billion point solutions that solve very discrete problems, which is the sort of VC go to market, right? Solve a land and expand or whatever. That's highly problematic. It's problematic from a discovery standpoint, from a product differentiation standpoint, especially if the costs are really low and there's no barrier to entry. And so you just have this, you have these market maps with 1,000 companies on them, and nobody knows what the hell to use or to do, and nobody can, it just becomes this noisy thing. And what people really want is something that's integrated, easy to use, requires less work, less, fewer tools, not more. You don't
less
want
fragmentation. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know if you have integrators that show up and say, we can bring all these things together and we make it easy for you
Agent
with this
integrators.
Yeah.
Agent
I mean, the way that people enter the market is with point solutions, solving a very discrete problem, but that's not really what ultimately the market wants. It wants something that's sort of unified and easy to use and does a bunch of things and brings information together, as opposed to having people with information, siloed and different, having to learn different systems. I mean, unless it's all incredibly intuitive and simple to use and cheap, in which case, that might go a long way to getting people to adopt them.
Yeah. What's interesting about this, like from an application standpoint, what we're doing, my company is creating this, a brain or central, like a brand central, kind of a place where you can train the AI on all your data, case studies, marketing materials, your website content, your blog content, all that's any kind of data that you have about your brand, you train it on Brand Central. And then there are all these extensions that come out of that, whether it's a voice AI or a chatbot or content that may be written, or maybe your own GPT. All of that are extensions from this Brand Central kind of thing that's created. So I could see how, what you're saying is you extrapolate that out in terms of number of different applications, how a company might be able to use AI in a number of different ways with having centralized data at the core of it, so that no matter what door people are coming through to interact with your brand, there's a way that they get this kind of personalized experience using all that brand data. Well, let's move on to our notes from the field. John, you were talking about thoughts on AI personalization before we started the recording here. Tell us a little bit about what's happening on that front.
Yeah, I mean, so the short version in talking about AI out in the world this week was I was talking to somebody who's actually a podcast producer, and I showed them Notebook LM, which surprisingly they had not seen yet, and they were blown away. I think one of my favorite things in the world these days is to show somebody that and like just watch their face as the podcast is created and spoken in front of them. And they were sure like, well, geez, what does this mean for my job? And what was interesting was it pushed me to think a little bit more about what role these kinds of solutions that can so authentically replicate the kind of content and media that we're used to, whether it's spoken word or music or whatever. What role they're going to have in our lives and in displacing the incumbents. And what it really highlighted to me was this idea of hyper one-to-one personalization, that, the more likely case than that one podcast producer being pushed out of business by this, which would suggest, it's because an AI podcast hits the charts and becomes one of the biggest podcasts around, is actually that, so rather than that one AI podcast getting 100 million users, it's that 100 million users each get one podcast that is very personalized to them. And that seems to be the world that we're, moving into very, very quickly. And we kind of all listed some examples of various services that are doing that kind of hyper personalization. I think we can expect to see a ton more of that. I have yet to see a hyper personalized playlist for me that includes songs written specifically for me. But that's coming too, right? That'll be here. Movies written and directed and performed specifically for me, like that's on the horizon.
That's a good way to end the show. I think that I'm going to have a personalized movie for me.
Yeah, that's what's headed our direction. I'm convinced of it.
I think some version of that will happen, but you would create it. You would create the scenarios yourself. You know, it would be a sort of a self-indulgent thing where you could play with different characters or images and build a little, build a film or animated.
Or, I would give the movie making AI access to my ChatGPT memory, which it turns out knows quite a bit about me and what I care about and what I've been up to. And now I have this fever dream, movie built on all the things I've told ChatGPT for the last year.
That doesn't necessarily make it a good story, though. I mean, story.
No, but it'd be a personal story.
All right. Well, on that note, thank you all. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll see you next week, and have a great one.
See you later,
Everybody.
Thank you.